Hi, this is Phil, and you're watching The Joy of Electronics. In this video, I'm going to talk about switches, specifically 3-pole double throw switches, or 3PDT switches. These are commonly used in guitar effects pedals, and that is what I will be using one of these in this video. I'll wire it up after we go over the functions of the switch. So these switches are generally used to engage a circuit with one click, and a second click will engage another circuit. So we have 9 terminals, and the 3P of 3-pole is talking about these 3 sets of poles, and the double throw is talking about when you stomp on the switch, it's either going to switch from one set of 3 poles to the other set of 3 poles. And I'll show you exactly what that means in a second. But for now, you can see we've got the top of the switch, usually used for stomping on with your foot, but you can engage these with your hand, no problem. We've got the bottom of the switch and the side of the switch. So these they're different colors. They come in all sorts of different colors and qualities. I'm not quite sure of the quality difference between these light blue ones or turquoise ones and these dark blue ones, but that's fine. So let's go over exactly what these switches do. So if we draw out the 9 terminals, I will show you the 2 positions using my son's Mr. Sketch scented markers. Oh, that smells good. So, in position 1 of the switch, we're going to have these connections made, center to one side. In position 2 of the switch, the connections are made to the other side. So, the switch is always in one of these 2 positions. It's either connecting the center poles to one side, or it's connecting the center poles to the other side. One click will switch between these 2 positions. So, the way that we would wire this up to a guitar effect pedal is as follows. We would have the center terminal going to the output jack, we would have this pin going to the input jack, we would have this center pin going to the PC board output, and let's find another color, and this one would be PC board input. The other thing we would do, there's one more thing we'll get to in a bit, but we will also put a jumper across 2 of the terminals. Okay, so there's an LED that we'll deal with as well, but basically you can see in this position, and I'll draw this in pink, that we're actually just connecting the input jack from the pedal all the way around to the output jack of the pedal. Right, so in this sense, this position is what's called true bypass. The guitar signal is coming in through the input jack, and it's going through the switch, across the jumper, and then right through the output jack. Now, in the other position, if we add our labels up here, PCB out, PCB in, call this the input, and this the output, well, output jack and input jack. So you can see in this scenario the signal is coming from the input jack, it's going out to the PC board or the guitar effects pedal circuit, going through the circuit, and then coming out from the PC board output lead, and then through the switch to the output jack. The rest is disconnected in this position. Alright, I'll put the jumper there. So we have the off position, we have the input going straight through the switch to the output, and the engaged position, we have the input going to the PC board, out from the PC board, and then to the output jack. The other element we can put on here, which is usually on a guitar effects pedal, is an LED indicator light to show that the pedal is engaged. And we do that by using the third pole of the 3PDT. And what we do is connect the center pole to ground, and then we would connect this top pole to our LED indicator with a resistor, we'll call that R1, and to +9 volts DC usually. So if I was to mimic that down here, you can see that in the on position, in the engaged position, we're actually connecting this LED to ground. We're completing this circuit, and the LED will light up, whereas in the bypass position the LED is disconnected. So this is the two positions of the 3PDT, and now we'll move on to wiring one up. Okay, here we've got Electro-Harmonix Big Muff Pi clone that I'm working on in this video series, and we're going to wire up the switch. So I've got the circuit board in place, and I've got a couple things hooked up to the switch already. We're really just going to do some soldering, and I'll point things out along the way. So if we refer back to the plan that we had, the center pin of the switch is going to go to the output jack. So here we've got kind of an orange wire, and we can follow it down here around, and it goes to the tip of the output jack. Okay, now right beside that, also in the center, we've got the input jack lead. So that's blue, and you can see that goes down here along the bottom of the enclosure, actually the face of the enclosure, and over here to the tip of the input jack. So those are our two input-output jacks. That deals with kind of the interface externally for the pedal. I've got a little jumper here ready to bridge across these two poles here. One thing to note is that you need to orient the switch properly. Obviously, we're talking about this as the center row. You know, this is not the center row. So you can tell by the way that the terminals are oriented. I mean, you can check with a multimeter too, but this is your center row, not this way, right? Because that's going to make a big difference. There's no switching in this orientation between these poles and those. The switching is center, top, bottom. So you want to make sure you have everything oriented correctly. So we've got our output jack in the center, input jack just to the right here, and we'll have the jumper at the bottom, so when the switch is in one position, these will be connected to the jumper, and then in the other position they'll be connected to, in the center is the output from the PC board, or the output from the effect, and that's this purple wire here, and this actually goes to pin 2 of this volume pot or level potentiometer. That's the output from this particular effect. The input to this particular effect is this yellow lead here, and we can see it goes down to the board here. So in one position, the input will be connected to the input of the effect, and the output will be connected to the output of the effect, and in the other position will be connected to the input and output will just be chained through this little jumper that's going to fit on the bottom there. So I'll just go ahead and solder these up quickly. These switches can melt if you fiddle with them too much, if you apply too much heat, if you're having trouble soldering, the plastic will melt. And you can see on this switch, I spent too much time fiddling with this particular terminal, and it actually it just melted out the plastic. The terminal starts to sag to one side, and you know, you realize you've screwed that up. And these switches aren't cheap. I mean, they're not the most expensive components, but they're definitely not the cheapest. So you want to be careful of your heat. You know, you could, if it's taking a while to flow the solder, you know, take a break, let it cool down. Maybe increase the heat on your iron so it'll flow faster, and then get back to it. These are pretty tight. You know, I do have some little bit extra on the leads here that I can trim now that I've soldered them. Normally I probably wouldn't have these all hooked up like this because it's a bit tricky to get the iron into that last one, but I'll just move that lead aside and we should be okay to get in here. So there we've got inputs and outputs all wired. So all we need to do now is the jumper. I didn't put that on for that reason I just mentioned, where I wanted to keep it a bit clear to get the iron in. I didn't want to melt this little piece of insulation, but now that we're all soldered, I can just pop it through like that. Oh, that looked like it was gonna stay perfectly, and then it just didn't. That's unfortunate. So just try to bend these leads out. These tiny little jumpers can be difficult to deal with. Not only getting the insulation off, but getting it to stay in place. I'm just trying to bend the leads out a bit here so it'll stay. It looks like it's going to stay. You do want to tighten these switches because they will turn, and there's a lock washer, a serrated washer or whatnot, that's going to try to dig in and keep it in place, but you know, they will turn. So you want to make sure you tighten it well, because turning would definitely screw things up in here. It would start pulling wires all over the place. You don't have to wire this type of setup exactly like this. You know, these 3 rows of poles, you know, function the same. So you could have, if it works better for the layout of the pedal, you could have the input over here and the output in the center, the output over here and the input in the center, or the LED on either side. I've put the LED on this side. It's not wired up yet, but you can see I have the LED here, so that's going to be really easy to connect these two to this LED and the power. So now that's all wired up. We can check it with a multimeter, engage the switch, disengage the switch. But that's generally it. That's how you wire up a 3PDT for a guitar effects pedal stomp box. My name's Phil, and this has been The Joy of Electronics.